Rahul, thank you very much and welcome to you.
Thank you so much. Since we took a break, I do want to refresh a little bit where we had left our last conversation. We were covering the 10 tenets of becoming an effective leader, and over the last few conversations, or I must say, series of conversations, we covered 8 out of the 10. And the last one that we had covered was about mastery of creating a result focused culture of accountability. And that session, we had spoken about a very powerful tool called OKR. And You had shared a framework to think about OKRs effectively through conversations, feedback, and recognition. So I think both OKR is a tool, and then uh, using a framework to build accountability was something I found very useful. And I want to continue that discussion today by covering two more, probably the last two of the 10 tenets that you have always spoken about in terms of building oneself into an effective leader. And one of them I find very relatable in my work as well. Before one gets into OKR, the skill that I'm talking about is the skill of strategic thinking. This is something that uh, not only is required as a skill, but even as a process. If I were to think of uh, b- developing a strategy comes before one thinks of OKR. So that's one that we will talk about, strategic thinking. And the second uh, uh, tenet that we'll speak about is about diversity and inclusion, how uh, effectively leading diversity and inclusion is so very important as a tenet for a leader now more than ever. So that's the second one that we'll talk about. So without any delay, let me get into the first one, which is strategic thinking and business planning. And let me ask with a very basic question, because all of us have different definitions. How do you define what strategic thinking is and its role in running or leading a business effectively?
Yeah, well, strategic thinking is more the mid to long term uh, planning process. And when you consider that for a moment, um, when we look at the year to come in an organization, we talk about the budget and we talk about cost and revenue and all these short-term steps. When we talk about strategic thinking, we need to think ahead. We need to consider the foundation of a strategy. And to me, this is often undervalued and often not really considered in its power as it actually has. And when I say this, I'm talking about vision. And sometimes when I talk with business leaders and business owners, they consider vision kind of a touchy-feely type thing, which really it isn't. The only thing it is, it touches people, and it engages people when it's done right. But it's not a touchy-feely thing. And I will give you some examples. For me, strategic planning without having established clarity in the vision for an organization or a company, you can't really make proper strategies. And if you do so, they will partly fail and will not be embraced by your organization. So the power of an engaging vision. Let me first of all there are interesting books to be read. There is one from who I consider the father of strategic planning, modern strategy, and I'm trying to recall right now the book, but his name is Igor Antsov, and he wrote his books in the 30s of the last century. And he influenced heavily somebody that is very famous in this, Michael Porter, who wrote the corporate strategy, and he wrote several books, but one of the most established ones is called the corporate strategy. And what Igor Antsov says is an effective vision should be 16 words or less. And the reason for that is everyone in the organization, no matter on which level or on which intellectual capacity, should be able to understand and reproduce the corporate vision on the spot. So if your vision is kind of a paragraph describing something, it's too long. You need to condense it to something short and sweet, and I will give you some examples in a moment. But the other thing about the corporate vision or vision in general is what it actually should describe. The vision is a description of a snapshot of the future. So it's in essence a description, a picture definition of something that's 5 years, 10 years down the road. That's something to aspire to. And it's something that people can get inspired from. And done right, it can be a very powerful instrument and first step and foundation of your strategy. And I like to use two vision statements that are so incredibly impactful. And the first is from the origins of Microsoft, when those 7, 8 guys in a garage shop were together. They created a vision, and let me first frame the environment. It was the time in the mid-70s, late 70s, when the IBM 360 was the standard model, which was a computer system that typically took up 2 floors in an office building, and that 370 was coming into the market. And there was the talk about the so-called microcomputer, which ended up to be systems like the AS400 or digital equipment, which wasn't using 2 stories of an office building, which only used 2 large rooms full of 19-inch racks, 8 feet high. And in that environment, those people, this Microsoft starting founder team, came up with a vision that was like that: a computer on every desk, period. A computer on every desk.
Wow.
Of course, at that time, all the experts around were saying, okay, they are having too many mushrooms.
Mm.
What do we have today? A supercomputer, relatively speaking, in every pocket.
Mm.
But the disk operating system software that they developed made it happen that we could have what became then the desktop computer. And that's what it started, that vision, that wild dream, that big picture put into a short statement. Everybody understood this, everybody could reproduce it, everybody could embrace it, and everybody could put his or her own fantasies into it and engage with it. And some people, of course, dismissed it, and others considered it this super dream of a possible future. Another one that I really liked was from Mr. Toyoda, back then the chairman of the board of Toyota, the Toyota Motor Company in Japan. And that was also, I think, in the late 70s. Mind you, at that time, the first Toyotas and Datsuns, later Nissan, came into the market in Europe and in North America. And they were little dinky cars. And I remember the Toyota, not Camry, it was Toyota Corolla.
Corolla, okay.
And it was a little car that fit back then into the trunk of a Chrysler. Not a Chrysler truck, because they didn't have one. A Chrysler limousine. And of course, people are saying, well, this will never be accepted in the market. They don't have a network. They don't have spare parts. It's not really a car. It just has four wheels. And I mean, all kinds of arguments were being provided. And at that very time, Mr. Toyota came out with a vision, and it was two kanji signs. And those kanji signs, those two signs, represented, in essence, two words. That was all. Two words. And those two words meant beat Benz.
Beat Benz.
Now again, think about, if you, well, this was probably before you were born. I don't know. But think about that environment, these little dinky cars versus all the big car companies in the world. At that time, this man put forward as a vision that Toyota automobiles will beat Benz, will beat Mercedes-Benz, be better than them. Now fast forward to, I think, 1994 or 95, the Lexus brand, which was the upscale brand of Toyota, is the upscale brand, did just that. It got in the global ratings, made the top spot, beat Mercedes-Benz, beat BMW, beat Cadillac, you name it. But when that vision was created and the strategy built then on it, it meant something to the different parts of the organization in Toyota. That was the time when you then all of a sudden saw all these Toyota engineers flocking out throughout the world, through every car exhibition there was, with tape measures and with cameras and with all kinds of instrumentation, because they were assessing what is state-of-the-art best practice. Because they went about it in a way, they said, okay, we are not going to reinvent wheels here in Japan. We are going to understand what is best practice for door handles, for carburetors, for whatever it might be on a car. And this is our starting point for our development. Whatever is best in class today is where we are starting to develop from. They cut out, in essence, 80 years of automobile based on this vision. And that is the power of a strong, engaging vision. It's very fascinating. And so no matter how big or small your company is or your startup is, I encourage every entrepreneur, every business owner, every executive to think, what is the right vision for my organization?
Mm.
Have this long-term picture, this description of this snapshot of the future, and condense it down to the essence. It's easy to write 2 pages about it, but then you need to draw it down and really boil it down to the very essence. When you can do that, you have a winner. And that's where strategic thinking and strategy planning really starts. And I'm sometimes called to clients to help them facilitate this strategy planning. And I'm asking, okay, what is the vision of the company? And I'm getting a fuzzy explanation of something. And say, okay, we really need to establish a clarity in the vision. No, we understand. We have a vision, and there is often a great lack of understanding of the importance of that. And the reality is often with a leadership team, the most time and energy in the end is spent on creating the vision and establishing clarity in the values that the organization is going to live by. Because that's the second part of the foundation. And the values are, for me, they are the non-negotiable basis for decision making. If you have clarity in your values, you can make your decisions based on them, and you will be okay. But it's important to have those really down and live them without compromise from the leadership throughout the organization. And I'll give you an example from my past in corporate life. I may have mentioned that before, but I worked for some 23, 24 years for, excuse me, for Norsk Hydro, Hydro Aluminum, a global player in the aluminum industry. And back in the days, aluminum smelters were not what they are today. There was a lot of carbon that was being used in the process, so it was all black and difficult to keep clean at the time, and it was hot in a smelter line, and they operated with these big trucks with where they had molten metal, which was transported from one cell to another place where it was cast into billets or into ingots or whatever is needed as a raw material. And accidents happened because that environment was rough. And deadly accidents were not uncommon. And our board made a decision at one point in time. I think it was 1987 or 89 at the time, made a decision. This is not acceptable. Safety must be our number one priority and number one value, because when somebody comes working for us and comes in the morning, we must make sure that they go home in the evening um, unhurt and certainly not dead. So that said, that was put forward, and it became, for every meeting, it became the first item on the agenda. If it was in an extrusion plant somewhere in the world, and you got visitors in, customer visitors, the first item was talking about safety. And when we do the tour, there are certain rules and regs, and these are PPE that you need to wear, and where the emergency exits were in case of an incident, and where that was the first item on the agenda. Every single time, every management meeting, every board meeting, first item was safety. And it became a lived value. And over the course of maybe 10 years, the global organization moved from having to live with a casualty a year or something like that, and bad accidents, torn off limbs, to where we started looking at near misses as the key measurement, because we didn't have deadly accidents anymore. We didn't have hospital-related accidents anymore. It was first aid sometimes. So we could focus really as a new measurement on near misses, accidents that didn't happen but could have happened, because people were attentive to look at that. And that's what values mean. You establish clarity in what you're going to live by and how you're going to make your decisions. And these two pillars are really the foundation for any strategic planning. And that's the basis for strategic thinking. And when we clearly understand that, then we can take the next step. It's our mission, which is more on what we are going to do or how we are going to do that, and then we get into the objectives, OKRs, and a scoreboard, and learn as a part of the strategy process, understanding your external environment, meaning marketplace, competitive place, supply chain and supply place. You need to get clear assessment and understanding of that. And then the internal capabilities, people, process, and resources. And all this together in a process planning, you come up then with a strategy. And to finish that off, I think it's important to understand what's the benefit of a strategy. And most people will immediately recognize, well, the benefit of the strategy is it tells me where we are going to go and how we are going to go about it. To me, actually, the more important component is it also defines what we will say no to. Because otherwise it's very easy to divert resources and money and time and everything to things that are not really taking us closer to our vision.
Yeah.
So, of course, there is a lot of more detail, which if it would take half an hour, it would be easy. But that's kind of the let's say the framework to think within. And,
Very
and, and
helpful.
when we talk strategy, I generally would recommend to anybody that is working on strategic thinking and on building a strategy, get outside help. Get somebody that is expertise in facilitating a strategy process for you, because then you and your team can focus on the content because somebody else is helping you through the process and will challenge you along the way when you get probably blind to certain things, because we all have one thing built in, which is called the confirmation bias, and one needs to be careful about that. And that an external resource can help make sure that you consider all the angles and all the right angles,
Hmm.
and takes you through a structured process to get from A to Z.
Very helpful, Manfred. I think at this point of time, I'll probably first, uh, in 30 seconds, just share what I understood from how you explained about what strategic thinking is. I think the framework that you created for us, it has got two core elements. One is the vision, and second is the values. So what you are sharing with us is uh, a strategy always first starts by having clarity on what the vision is, and what the values are which the organization and the leaders will adhere to, and they kind of create a boundary or a constraint around boundary plus a constraint around which to think about the strategy. And then of course comes, once you have clarity on the vision and the values, then of course comes what the mission is, what the goal is, and around that, how do you define where to focus on, what choices to make, in the areas where the organization would like to focus on, and how to execute on those, and that then gets translated into the OKRs. So that, in a nutshell, is how you explain to us what a strategy is, and strategic thinking is nothing but the thinking that is required in this entire process to develop a strategy. So I think that's one part. And uh, I also wanted to share, when it comes to strategic thinking, some of the examples that I've seen. So I've seen organizations which use the term strategy, but in reality, uh, what they are referring to is just the previous year's financial plan extended into the next year. So a lot of times, uh, uh, all organization would say that we have a strategy, but what they actually have is just a financial plan. So I think thanks for bringing that nuance, in terms of when it comes to strategic thinking and strategy, it means much more than just extending your financial plan. A second set of organization I have seen, they make it too complex, and often leaders have different versions of what, according to them, is a strategy. So that's the second set of organizations that I have worked with. And again, the reason it comes in is when the organization becomes too large and uh, they have people who are capable of thinking strategically, then that coherence is missing. Everyone has their own version of strategy, and often what happens in that case is that the leadership is trying to go in multiple directions. And I think that's where your point about seeking external help becomes very relevant, because someone is required to play two, three very important roles, I would say, in the strategic planning process. One is bringing structure to the thinking, so asking the right questions, because to me, I have seen it on my own as well. If someone is not asking the right questions, a lot of times due to confirmation bias and few other biases, the leadership doesn't end up looking at different aspects of the problem carefully, and often they go in the direction of the most powerful voice in the room. Often it could be the CEO, while there could be a good amount of challenge that could be required into what the CEO might be thinking. So that's one role, bringing the structure. Second is the process, which I think you also hinted, that someone needs to make sure that different aspects of the strategic thinking and planning process, they are brought in whenever strategy is getting developed. And third, I think what I also find missing in many organizations is the right level of synthesis to bring in coherency. Often it's not that leaders are saying different things and one is wrong and one is completely right. But a very important element that I found is uh, strategy to me is about making a choice uh, such that the organization focuses on the current challenge by applying the biggest amount of leverage that it has. And let me explain what I mean. Uh, I might have clarity on my vision or my purpose, and I'm reflecting on few of the previous projects that I worked on. So this clarity was there, but I might not be fully clear on which is the most important challenge to overcome over the next few years to reach a specific goal. So strategy to me plays this role, that first identifying what is the core challenge that needs to be overcome over the medium term. Second, identifying the strengths and the leverage that the organization has, and this is very organization specific. What might be a leverage for organization A might not be the leverage for organization B. While both of them might be in the same sector and hence the challenge might be similar, but it's very, very important that for me, for my organization, what is the leverage? Because highest amount of impact can be achieved by my organization if I'm aware of where do I apply the leverage. So strategy then clarifies what the challenge is. It clarifies where the leverage is for me, and then creating a plan where I'm able to say no, like the example that you were mentioning, to say no to quite a few other choices which could be attractive for other organization, but might not be the most attractive one for me, and for me to then apply the leverage and overcome the challenge and achieve the medium term goal. So that's the role that to me strategy plays, and the whole strategic planning process helps leaders identify the medium term goal, and how do they together apply the leverage. So that's just another example that I also wanted to share based on the work I had done. But I think in a nutshell, agreeing with the framework that you shared, wanted to elaborate it further with some of the work that I have done, and this leads me to the next part, which is
Can I add something?
sure, please.
I think we should also not underestimate the once you have that foundation, that the vision and values, the rest will fall into place much easier and much more yeah, easier, because things become clearer. The other thing that's important with the vision as well, in all these decisions that you then make in your execution or short-term plans, you can test everything against that vision. You can test it. If I do X, will that take us closer to that vision, or will that take us aside or even back? So every decision that you make, you can then test against that vision. And is it within the values of our organization? Are we acting within that? Those two criteria will keep you on track towards the big picture. And that's one of the inherent beauties of it. That's That's all I will say.
Totally agree. I think totally agree. So these are like again falling into the for me that bucket where I was also indicating someone has to ask the right questions, and two of the most important questions are these: Um what actions do I take to move closer to my north star or my vision or my purpose? And second, are these actions within the constraints of the values that we want to adhere to? And while these two are probably the most important set of questions, there are few more similar to this which help define a good strategy.
Mhm.
So thanks for emphasizing them again, Manfred. And on that note, I want to link this to the other question. I think if I am a leader, sometimes the question that I might be thinking of or a feedback that I might be receiving is I need to think more strategically. And I have heard it from some of the leaders that I have worked with, that as specifically those who are in the middle management going to senior management, that a feedback that they have been given by either their bosses or um, um, mm, someone senior in the organization, that now you need to develop strategic thinking, you need to think more strategically. What uh, are one or two ways in which you have helped some of your coaches develop this skill of thinking strategically, and how can one think about some habits to pick up strategic thinking as a skill?
Well, I, I'll take this a little bit from a different angle. What I often see with business owners and with executives is uh, they they invest time into a strategic planning session, and then we have developed a nice little document, and it's beautifully printed, and it goes into the second drawer on the right side. And a year or 2 years from now, we take it out, dust it off, and look at it and see if we need to change something, and then it goes back into the drawer. Because people are very manifested in this quarter and this year. They think in execution terms. And let me be very clear, execution is where things happen. But in order to define what is the best execution and how the sequence should be, you need to think strategically. And why that is often difficult is that leaders are so preoccupied with here and now that they do not have the space and the time, and often also not the people they can reflect with, to discuss the strategic issues, the more longer term, big impact issues. And so when I help develop strategic thinking, the first thing that I work with is helping those leaders with better self-discipline in their time management, to free up time in their delegation skills, to free up time and energy so that they can set aside on a regular basis time where they can think the long term, not what has to happen this week and this month and this quarter, but what is the big picture going forward? What are the influences that might be somewhere on the peripheral areas? Because that's a different thinking approach versus what happened, and now how do we fix this to get to the next step? What strategic thinking is really is taking yourself away from the day-to-day grind and allowing the time and the space, creating the time and the space where you can look further ahead, where you can look at trends, pay attention to certain trends that might or may not influence what you're doing or what you want to be doing, what you want to achieve. So, and that will then allow to be more proactive rather than react to it when it hits you. And so when you say, how do you help somebody to think more strategically, it's really about helping to create the time and the space where you can focus on strategic issues. So it's not that I go, okay, now Rahul, let's do a lesson on strategic thinking. It's more a question, okay, Rahul, what prevents you from investing some quality time in a way that is effective, where you don't think about this quarter, but where you think about 3 years from now? And of course, it depends also a little bit on the industry, because if you are developing apps, you're not thinking in 3-year terms strategically. You're thinking in 6-month terms. And what happens this week is execution, and 6 months down the road, maybe a different strategy. If I go back to smelters, if you build a new smelter, between making the decision to invest into it versus getting the first load of molten metal from the smelter is typically a 5 to 7 year time span. So thinking about capacity increase in a smelter, you don't have a 3-year time span, you have a 10-year time span. So it really depends also on the industry, what horizons you need to consider.
Sure.
For your strategic thinking.
Yeah, I think that's a very important distinction, Manfred. First, I'll call it what you are defining as,
or excuse me, or take city planning. City planning is not a question of a 3-year horizon. If I take the city of Greenville where I live, they made a plan 30 years ago that now they are again in the planning phase for the next 30 years.
So one addition I'll make as I'm reflecting on what you just said. So one aspect is the foundational element of the space and time. So if someone were to develop the skill of strategic thinking, you need to create time, you need to make time, quality time, to have that thinking, because a lot of us are in operational day-to-day role where we need to deal with problems, where our actions will create result today itself, in a week's time, maybe a month's time. That's what most of our time is, and hence to develop strategic thinking, the first requirement is having space and time. The second distinction that you are creating is that the kind of questions that one were to answer when it comes to strategic thinking, they have a longer term horizon in terms of impact. So operational decisions like um, you gave example of, they could have uh, an impact that can be seen, or outcome that can be seen in a week's time, in a month's time, or maybe within this quarter. But strategic questions are those where the impact could be coming in a slightly longer term horizon. And the smelter example that you gave there, the or city planning example that you gave there, the impact or outcomes could get created over years. So while that aspect could vary from industry to industry, and there is no absolute number, but what is very clear from your examples is that when it comes to strategic thinking, the decisions that need to be taken, they have a longer horizon or longer time horizon compared to tactical or operational decisions that need to be taken on a day-to-day role. So these are two important distinctions. I'll add a third one, Manfred, based on whatever work I do as well. Uh, and one of the things that one of the uh, ways I also add to the kind of questions when it comes to strategic thinking is that often uh, the decisions which are strategic in nature, uh, they simplify um, the amount of effort or resources that are required to do or execute a critical aspect of the business. So going back to that example I was talking about, that there is a goal, there is a challenge to achieve that goal, the core challenge, and then there is leverage. If uh, I am focusing on my area of strength, then it can be assumed that I have a very high amount of leverage, which with lesser effort compared to my competition, I might be able to overcome this challenge. So if I take the same example, strategic questions often look at challenges in a different way, that I'm putting so much resources, so much effort in, let's say, acquiring customers. When I wear the hat, wear the strategic thinking hat, the question I would ask is that what do I do, or where do I focus on, so that the amount of money that I'm spending in acquiring customers uh, significantly reduces, or the number of people that are required to acquire each customer, they reduce significantly, or the other way around, that with this much amount of effort, how do I acquire two times or three times more customers? So those are the kind of questions that one asks probably once a year, and then iterates on those, um, and drawing this distinction, versus saying that from an operational perspective, whatever goal I had for this month, now how do I execute on them? So that decision would become an operational decision, that how do I acquire more customers this month based on the target that I have, versus how do I amplify the outcomes, or how do I create more leverage for the outcomes that I want to create. So that's the third distinction I also wanted to add on top of the two that you created. Does that resonate with you a bit?
Yes, and from a strategic perspective, I will challenge you when you focus on new customers and new clients. I would challenge you. What do you do to maintain your existing clients? Because for everyone that you lose, that you have, you need to replace one just to be even. So often companies or organizations, it's a specific strategic example. They have a great focus on generating new clients or new customers uh, for growth, but they have a fluctuation of 20% of maintaining customers. So, in essence, if you would say, well, 10% customer growth would be great, but the reality is you need, in order to get 10%, you need 30% because you're losing 20% every month.
Sure. And I think since I was giving this as an example of new customer acquisition, for me, the strategic question is that how do I retain existing customers, or how do I increase the renewals in case I'm in an industry where renewals is a possibility. So how do I
For
apply
example.
the leverage to retain or get increased renewals? That's like you would be asking these questions, this particular type of question when you are doing strategic planning. But when you are executing, it would be how do I increase the renewals this month?
Mhm.
How do I hit the renewal target this month? So for me, these are two
Absolutely.
examples.
Yeah.
One is a question that I asked, that how do I apply my leverage in acquiring customers? Second is how do I apply my leverage in retaining customers or getting more renewals? But to me, what I wanted to share was the distinction between strategic question in renewal or acquisition versus the operational question that I would be asking on a monthly or a weekly basis in both these areas.
Mhm.
And on that note, I want to bring this particular session to a close. Was a lovely session. Two very important topics that we talked about: strategic thinking, business planning, as well as diversity and inclusion. It kind of was a nice way to round up also the 10 tenets that we spoke about over the last few episodes, few sessions of how to become an effective leader. Personally, I have benefited a lot. I have learned a lot on how to improve myself as a leader. So thank you so much for your time, not only for today, but also for all the sessions in which you took time out, shared interesting stories, clarified concepts in a simpler way to remember them, and also your own professional stories of your own work. So thank you so much for that effort as well as on those thoughts.
It's my pleasure and it's fun. I enjoy that. And anybody who has any questions or wants to uh, uh, have a conversation about something, please feel free to contact me. I guess it's on the contact information is going to be provided with the podcast and so.
We'll do that. And very quickly, since we are on that, what's the best way to reach out to you? Your email or your LinkedIn page?
LinkedIn page is perfect. Email would be mgolland, MGOLLENT at qli-international.com or via my website, qli-international.com.
Awesome. So this brings to a conclusion a very interesting series that we had. I do look forward to another new one, another interesting set of topics to talk to you about. But till then, thank you so much. You have a lovely day ahead, a great week, and look forward to welcoming you to Canada.